Welcome to season 2, episode lucky 13 of Ticket to Ride, in a special 4th of July holiday weekend box office overview.
Wave the flag, wave the flag,
Wave the flag. I don't have one. I've got Armenian flags somewhere around here. So I'm Paul DeGarabedian, Senior Media Analyst for ComScore. Thaddeus Bouchard, Screen Dollars. Mike Polydor's Paper Airplane. They really need no introduction at this point, but let's get right into it, guys. So we're right in the middle of the 4th of July sweepstakes right now at the box office. Jurassic has done incredible business. Jurassic World Rebirth, which is I think this is going to be a huge 4th of July weekend. However, as we spoke of, the three of us before we started recording, the 4th of July is a floating holiday. It lands on different days of the week. So making apples to apples comps is often tough, but we're going to run through a lot of data. And so Mike, you were mentioning that.
I think it's really, here's the thing about the 4th of July. The 4th of July is a bit of a mixed bag. It's always considered a huge movie going weekend, which it is. However, the 4th itself is usually not necessarily that big of a day. It's similar to something like Labor Day, where...
Isn't it because the obvious thing is that if people are out watching fireworks at the movie theater, or out partying,
that's exactly right. And to your point, it's a floating holiday, so it's a real mixed bag on how it plays out in relationship to where it is in the week. So on this, in this case, what I would say is the last time that 4th of July was on a Friday was 2014. And Paul, what was the overall 3-day and weekend on that?
So for the July 4, 2014, which is a Friday, through the 6th, the 3-day, a mere $133.7 million, but with Transformers Age of Extinction leading the way. But that movie had opened on June 27. Right. So it wasn't like 2011 where Dark of the Moon Transformers, that movie just blew the doors off in a 5, a 6, and almost a 7-day frame. We'll get into that a little bit later. Right. Tammy was the brand new film, the Warner Brothers film. That opened at $21.577 million. So the collective total for those movies was not exactly anything to write home about. But Mike, you make a great point about the day of the week for 4th of July matters. It was always the conventional wisdom that you really never wanted 4th of July to land on a weekend, on a Friday, Saturday, or even a Sunday, because theoretically it hurts box office. But we'd have to actually dig into, what percentage of people are out on the 4th of July or watching fireworks or not at the movie theater? I don't know how you do that unless you just...
Well, you think about what are the biggest movies of the year for the last 5 years, and they all land at different times. It isn't like the biggest movie of the year is always the weekend before Christmas or the weekend before Thanksgiving, although the holiday helps, certainly.
Sure.
Because people are in more of a relaxed frame of mind where they're looking for entertainment, and people are gathered because they're looking for things to do with their friends and family. But at the end of the day, it's a product-driven business, as we say again and again and again. So it depends on the movies that are actually in theaters.
Yep, and that makes a really good point. So as we sit here on Thursday, the 3rd at roughly 11 in the morning Pacific time, Universal has not come out with their official number yet, but it was right around $31 million that they did. There was not a ton of what I would call Tuesday money. They did some early access PLF. They did about 1.9 million, somewhere around there, I think, is what they were talking about. So ultimately, 31 million that they did yesterday. The way that looks like it's playing out, if you kind of lay over how the 4th of July is played when it's on a Friday before. And again, we don't have a ton of, going back to 2014 was 11 years ago, but plugging in the numbers, Paul, looks like we're looking at about probably 94, 95 million for 3 and, right a little north of 150 for 5, which would exceed pretty much all the pre-release expectations that were
Yeah.
out there. Um, if you add in all the holdovers, it looks to me like right now we're probably looking at 155 north of that for 3 for the weekend. So we'll be ahead of 2014. And the 5 day looks like it could come in as high as 245 to 250, which would be enormous way to start off the month of July. And again, when you're doing these box office projections, and here we are, like I said, on a Thursday, we're trying to map out what a weekend's going to look like. Any little wobble with numbers this high is going to cause a bit of a fluctuation.
And Mike, I love the numbers that you brought up, because we're going to check you, because if you're right, man, this is great, because Transformers Dark of the Moon, just to go through the ComScore data really quickly. Now, you were saying maybe 94 for the 3 days. And so just to go through some of the records, so Transformers Dark of the Moon opened on a Wednesday. I have the comps for Wednesday 4th of July openers, irrespective of what day 4th of July fell on. But Transformers Dark of the Moon, it did have a preview day on a Tuesday, the 28th of June in 2011. But the official opening was on Wednesday. So the opening weekend gross for that, meaning the Friday through Sunday, again, opening on a Wednesday, just like Jurassic World Rebirth, 97.8 million. You were saying, Mike, about 94 for Rebirth. Then opening 5 days, Wednesday through Sunday. And remember, they had a preview day on Tuesday that was 16.1 million, which Jurassic doesn't have that. So it's not apples to apples, but 157.1 million. That's the record for 5 days, Wednesday through Sunday, for a 4th of July film opening on a Wednesday. So
is that right? Wow. So they're not going to be that far off. And again, any little wobble one way or the other as far as the ups and downs, really, when you're talking about a number this big, makes a big change. So if they get a better than expected today or tomorrow, they could be challenging for that record then.
Well, I'm glad you made that distinction. You're saying it could wobble. It's definitely, this trajectory. It's a 5 day. It's got a lot of variables in it. Now, Spider-Man 2, interestingly, that opened June 30, Wednesday in 2004, some 21 years ago, earned 88.1 million for the 3 days. And get this, Mike, 152.4 million for the opening 5 days, Wednesday through Sunday. And that powered an overall, though, 5 day for all films in the marketplace at 273.4 million.
And I don't think we're going to get to that.
No, I don't think
that does not seem, right now looking at it, you've got F1 that looks like it's probably going to be, in that 30 to $35 million range for the 5 day, which, by the way, will be huge because that'll put that movie over the $100 million mark since its opening.
Right.
And Jurassic, the franchise has been amazing. I pulled some of those numbers, and they've never had one open. They've been June openers, and I love going back to I'm going into the ComScore engine room right now to dig up the bones of the Jurassic background of these films. So the very first film, obviously, I remember when that came out, Mike. I'm sure you do too, and Thaddeus as well. June 11, 93, opened to $50.1 million unadjusted for inflation. That film did a 7.17 times multiple to wind up at $359.6 million domestically. That's insane. An opening day gross of $18.2 million for the original Jurassic Park, based on Michael Crichton's book, Steven Spielberg directing, and the rest, as they say, is history.
That film had so much buzz around it. I remember when it was sort of in the month leading up to it, sort of because it was based on famous book, famous director, sci-fi sort of genre, which was very popular then and now as well. And obviously it created a franchise, or it started a franchise. And but that was such a such an exciting moment when that film came out, because it felt so new, the special effects and everything.
Yeah.
It just felt so new. So.
And Mike, you had been in the industry longer than I had. At that point, though, I'm not trying to age you, by the way.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
But I remember I had started in the business on March 3rd of '93. I remember it well. That's when I started my career in the industry. And to have just a few months later in June to have Jurassic Park open, what a great trial by fire for me to get more into the business and the numbers and all that, get the box office.
Well, I mean, a quick, you think about this Jurassic Park, Jurassic World franchise that goes back to, when you started, Paul. $2.2 billion domestically.
Yeah.
That this franchise has basically grossed. This is kind of the second reboot toward it. Not that it's and again they've threaded the needle. I wouldn't call them reboots because they definitely acknowledge the previous installments in the franchise, but they've done a really good job of keeping it fresh, and they freshened up the cast this time. They've gone a little darker.
But they needed to, Mike,
movie.
right? Because the last one didn't fare as well. The last Jurassic World didn't do as well as the first Jurassic World movie, which was a huge hit. Mm-hmm. So I think it's good. I mean, Universal has a history of retooling or rebooting, like with the Fast and Furious franchise, how after Tokyo Drift it was like, oh boy, we're in trouble. And then, wow, they just reinvented itself, and I think they've done that here with the Jurassic.
Well, and that leads into kind of a bigger topic, and that is the summer itself of this year. And I know, Paul, you were bullish on the $4 billion summer, and I think we're moving in that direction.
Hope so.
Yeah, no, I mean it feels like we've still got some high end titles yet to come. As we kind of just kicking off July
we
here.
We do have a lot of big titles to come. We can go through those too. But, real quick, Mike, just to follow up, you were absolutely correct on the domestic cume for all the Jurassic movies at 2.2 billion, 2.264 billion. The global cume for all the films, that includes like any reissues, all that, but $6 billion worldwide.
Mm-hmm. And you wonder why they did. And you wonder why they put a new franchise or a new installment out.
That's right.
You also wonder why studios are trying to create new franchises. So every time there's a significant investment in a new, well-funded film, it's like, could it become something that's a series? It's not a one-off. Films are less.
Well,
one-off.
it's creating a franchise these days is not easy.
Yeah.
And we look at F1, and I don't know if you guys would consider it based on original IP or because F1 is based on the Formula One series. Does that existing IP? But, it knocked off Sinners as being the highest opening for a original IP film since the pandemic. And
well, Mike, that begs for a great definition. Let's go through this. So, what is original and what is known IP? I always say, like with F1, it's an original movie, right? There wasn't an F1 prequel or an F1 1, right. And there probably will be an F2.
F0.
I think you can pretty much bank on that.
But, and like Sinners, I look at as being differentiated from the March movies that didn't perform in as much as Michael B. Jordan and Ryan Coogler together are a brand. But that's so is that IP? I guess it is.
Alfred Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock was a
again,
brand, right? Right.
Yeah, look, the original IP is still continuing to struggle. We don't have to look any further than Ilio from our friends over at Pixar to see. Here's a movie that is critically acclaimed, audiences like it, and it's struggling to find an audience. Yeah. And a good part of that, I believe, is it's that original IP again trying to break through.
Right.
But it's not a guarantee if you have a known IP that you're going to have success either. Like, look at Megan 2.0. Jason Blum, I'm not speaking out of school here, he went out and said we miscalculated a bit by changing the genre a little bit and then making the former antagonist now the protagonist. He just went through all those things for why that movie
Well,
didn't work.
he also mentioned something that I think you mentioned last year, Paul, when the movie was I guess that was 23, so I guess we're talking 2 years ago. One of the things that made that movie ultra successful was its play period as well. It was a January release. It had come in right after the holidays. It was fresh. There was not a lot of competition for it. It filled a void. It's a lot different when you're opening up, and he pretty much said this in an interview I read with him, that basically the release date, it's a different game when you're playing with the big boys in summer.
And he spoke with Matt Bellany on the Town podcast about it, Jason Blum, and was very frank about it. Now, they've made so many billions of dollars with modestly budgeted films over the years that he even said, when you're I'm paraphrasing, but like, when you're a superstar outfit, you're going to have some slumps. It doesn't matter. And I would say even in sports and other areas as well. But I think by going in the summer, which I said to Pam McClintock in the Hollywood Reporter this week, in regard to Megan 2.0, is that it's the Wild West out there. It's a gladiator school. It's not, this is a very competitive marketplace. I said it was Dickensian, and it's the best of times for some and the worst of times for others, in the parlance of our times, using a literary reference. But I think it's great for theaters to have all these movies. But again, you're going to have casualties out there, right, guys? I mean, you're not every movie is going to perform to expectations. And June was down, and we can talk about that. But April, May were up huge. And Mike, what do you call it? The movie gods? You always say.
Well, but let's go back and talk about June a little bit, Paul.
Yeah.
So June was down. I don't know if you have.
I've got it right.
I don't know if you have what it was ultimately down.
It was down 12% through the 29th. I'll run it again for the full month, but it was down about 12%.
And the majority of that was all due to Inside Out 2 last year. So as much as we were hailing Inside Out 2 last year for kind of saving the day and coming in with $654 million, which I think it did about 450 of that, during June or something along those lines. I looked at this last week. It made up 47% of the entire gross of the month of June last year. Right. Yeah. This year, different story. This year, the wealth was spread out fairly evenly through the month of June as far as the top releases. That, to me, I think How to Train Your Dragon was the top grossing, if I'm not. But it made up. It was 23% of the gross. So the difference being, last year everything was all about one movie. This year the wealth was spread around, which I think ultimately long term is better. So while it's down 12%, the silver lining is more movies were performing in the marketplace.
Right. And it was How to Train Your Dragon, which account for 24% of the month. Now, Lilo and Stitch was the number 2 movie for June. Mission Impossible, Final Reckoning, then F1. But you had Ballerina, 28 years later, Elio, Karate Kid Legends. All really good movies, but they didn't really. If all of those would have had to have overperformed to beat out Inside Out 2 and even Bad Boys Ride or Die, which kicked off the month of June right ahead of Inside Out 2 last year. So that's what's going to happen. Like next year we could be looking at that record Memorial Weekend of this year, and going, wow, we're down now. I mean, you got to take the good with the bad. When we live through the record-breaking moments, we have to realize that sets a new bar, and then the following year you'd be like, "Oh, we're way down."
What's the period of time when it makes sense to start to draw conclusions? Obviously, week to week, you can't draw conclusions, whether it's chronologically
that's a
one
really
week versus
good
a
point.
year previous the same week. Is it quarterly? Is it yearly? I mean, I
think the benchmarks are, going into the summer. So up until whatever that May 5th weekend would be our first benchmark. I think the next benchmark would be Labor Day, after Labor Day weekend. And, we're looking at Paul's $4 billion summer, and everybody's got a big smile on their face. And then, the next benchmark would be going into the holiday season.
Let me go through the quarters real quick. Mike, you bring up this is the perfect time to do that. So Q1, the number 1 movie was Captain America: Brave New World. We were down Q1 12.2%. The year before, 24 had Dune Part 2 leading the way, and that's why we were down for Q1. Q2, get this, up 39% versus Q2. Obviously, April. What opened in April? I don't know. A Minecraft movie, Sinners. So what a difference a year makes. A Minecraft movie.
And right at the beginning of the quarter, too. So it had the whole quarter to play as well. And both of those movies played so well for the whole quarter. Yeah.
Good point. Great point. And then April and May combined, you want to take a stab at how much we were up? Minecraft movie leading the way. And just to help everybody out here, this is for the audience, too. What was the film last year that led April and May in 24? And there's a big difference between the gross in those two. So April and May combined was up, drum roll please, versus 24.
Like 50% or something like that, right?
90%.
Wow, goodness. Wow.
I wouldn't have known off the top. I always ask questions that I already know the answer.
Number.
That's how I make myself look smart. 90%, Mike. So Minecraft movie in April, May generated 422.7 million. Last year, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which really was the only bright spot in that May month, with a record low Memorial Weekend, 133 million. So almost a $290 million advantage for a Minecraft movie. And that's why, Mike, remember, and Thaddeus, when we were at CinemaCon this year, this was at the end of March. March was down the month of March was down 46% at that point versus March of 24. Everybody was in the dumps. Everybody was bummed out, at the bar, getting drunk, just drowning their sorrows at CinemaCon. And then April, that Friday is when a Minecraft movie opened. Suddenly, all fortunes changed take one little bitch at a time and determine what the health of the industry is by that.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about, is what is the health of the industry? There's so much focus and attention on how is this industry doing, whether it's from the studio side or it's on the exhibition side. And that's why these numbers are tracked so closely, is because people are taking a measure of how we doing, and there's some anxiety over it for obvious reasons because of the pandemic and the journey we've all been on here of the last 5 years. So that's why we do it, right?
What do they say, Thaddeus and Mike? A watched pot never boils.
Right.
So if you're constantly looking at how is the industry doing? Oh, we're down. Uh-oh, it's the end of the world.
Right.
Do you guys want to go through? We're getting up here on the half-hour mark in a bit. I want to go through, if you'd like. We could do whatever you want. What do you want to do, guys? We could look through the upcoming.
I think it's time to go through there's a couple of big titles that are lurking out there. What do you got there, Paul?
Well, I got for you got a little Superman for you. That opens July 11. That's I think that's a movie that's top of mind for everyone. I have not seen it. I am a Crypto the Superdog fan. I want a movie of his own at some point. I'm just, throw me a bone, people. Give me a crypto movie. I think, do you guys have any comments on that? How important is the PLFs or the premium formats for Superman?
Well, I think the PLFs are, with any movie of this scale, whether it's Jurassic, whether it's F1, and now we're looking at Superman, they're hugely important.
Sci-fi action, superhero, it's absolutely essential. It's very much of a global campaign, obviously a global movie and a global campaign. I don't know, do you guys know if Superman has a play date in China? That's another sort of topic that we all think about, whether the international grosses will come through.
I'd have to look at that. I'm not, we should know that, but let's cut that out so we don't look dumb. No, I'm just kidding. Sure. I'm sure it does, but it may not. Right. Sometimes they wait and put a date on it. We'll find out. We'll ask the studio audience for an insist on that. I was going to say, and maybe this is a sticky wicket, but it's worth talking about. That's what Ticket to Ride is all about, is the industry. So we have Jurassic, a lot of premium screens. Right. Superman's going to need them too.
Right.
Discuss how does the industry work with that?
Well, I guess the interesting thing, or if you want to call it the fact on the PLFs are, it's what have you done for me lately? So it's a very kind of week to week to week programming the way it goes. So, How to Train Your Dragon into F1, into Jurassic, into Superman. I mean, that's pretty much how it goes.
I have to say, Mike, you just said it right there. I think the industry actually threads that needle pretty well, considering the level of competition for that real estate. Those.
Well,
I think
and
the bigger circuits split the screens across the different locations as well, if I'm not mistaken, don't they?
Well, it all depends. It really depends on where they are with it. In this current stretch, pretty much the way I laid it out is kind of the way that they're programming. If you noticed last weekend, I believe that on F1, the PLFs, accounted for almost 50% of the total gross. So people were very much pushed to see that. That is going to then, when you look at the drop this weekend, you have to take that into effect a little bit, because that means they're losing whatever it is percentage-wise off the ticket price. It's a very, it kind of bounces around a little bit on that, on what those are. It'll be interesting to see what the percentage of, PLFs are this weekend on Jurassic. And the PLF has changed as well, too, because remember, back when I was a youngster and had hair, PLFs were, you had IMAX. That initially was the PLF. And then you had Dolby. And then you had IMAX, Dolby, and then D-Box. And then you had the motion seats. And then you had ScreenX. So you start adding all these different types of, premium formats into the equation. They all have their own individual upcharges, that get counted toward box office. So, that actually leads to probably another topic, and that is, while box office, is up at a certain percentage, attendance is not quite up.
And we need to we should do a whole episode on that, because that's really interesting. Right. I also did before we wrap soon, I also did a study of the ratings and what's leading the charge. I figured that PG at this point would be in the lead, although F1 and Jurassic are going to bring up PG-13. Right. But it's interesting this year, because of Sinners and Final Destination, Bloodlines, R-rated movies so far this year, before Jurassic, have outgrossed PG-13.
Is that right?
13 is trailing, which is unusual. Normally, pre-pandemic, it was always PG-13. I have the chart, was number one. Last year and this year, PG movies have ruled the box office, and the year before. So that's a bit of a sea change, another future topic. And there have been a lot of articles written on that. Why is PG now the go-to? I think we know why, because it's become cool, and everybody can go see a PG movie, theoretically. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff. Oh, let me just run through the upcoming releases, then we'll wrap it up. And I just want to leave our audience with let's recap July.
Well, hey, Paul, I want to just dovetail on what you just said, because it's very interesting when you look at the top grossing movies for the year. If you take the top 5, 3 of the top 5 are what I would call family films. You have Minecraft, Lilo and Stitch, How to Train Your Dragon, all accounting in that top 5. Yeah. And then, you can there's the holiday holdover at number 9 of Mufasa, and then you have, Dogman at number 10, and Disney's Snow White at number 11, and Sonic at number 12. So basically, family film is alive and kicking and thriving in our business right now.
Yeah, and that's why I ran that, because you have so much box office being generated. And by the way, those numbers that I calculate, I include the holdovers in any given year, because that's the only way you can. That's the only way you should do it.
Yeah, well, because that's what's getting registered. Yep.
Right. Exactly.
So let's go quickly over what we've got coming up.
Lightning round. First of all, I want to just pay homage to I can't even talk. I'm so excited. I want to give a lot of credit to July. Just recapping again: Jurassic World Rebirth, Superman, Smurfs. I Know What You Did Last Summer, Eddington, Fantastic Four: First Steps, and The Home, and House on Eden, and Together. I wanted to throw in, Roadside Attractions, IFC A24, some cool movies in there. I never want to forget those. And we should do a Ticket to Ride look at the indie films of the summer and the top ones, just for, that would
Excellent.
be cool. And then August, The Bad Guys 2, Naked Gun, Weapons, Freakier Friday.
Right.
There's a lot of cool, Nobody 2. There's some cool movies in there. I look at the month of August is a really cool one. Caught Stealing, The Roses.
Yep.
And then September 5th, just to give a little tease, The Conjuring Last Rites. I'm all in. I love the Conjuring franchise.
Look, it's stacked pretty good, and I've seen a lot on the Roses, at various different conventions we've been at, and I'm convinced that movie is going to work. To what level I couldn't tell you, but I think that's a movie that looks like it's fun. Looks like the cast is having a great time with the movie.
Yeah.
It looks to me like that one's going to deliver.
I love August. I've always said that. I think it's a great month. You get the the edgier fare, I should say.
Sure.
And I always talk about District 9 and Glorious Bastards. I believe Apocalypse Now was a August release. It's just a really cool month where studios will take some chances.
Well, I want to go back to Superman for a second.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about that is what, that's going to be one where the box office predictions from the outside are going to be all over the place. And, what's realistic on that and, what's not. Paul heard my rant last week. I heard somebody on one of the radio stations, they were talking about F1, and they were saying that the movie was, going to make over $100 million. Now, I don't know if they were talking about international or domestic. They did not differentiate on any of that.
Right.
But it was it's irresponsible to go out there and do that because you set a bar that is unachievable and was never going to happen. F1 coming in where it did, at $57 million, huge. Warner's and Apple should be. They brought that movie over the finish line. They found ways to expand an audience that had always been difficult for like an F1 type of movie, and that movie is going to go out and be a big success. From a theatrical box office standpoint. Again, I can't talk about the finances of how the movie, whatever the budget cost and whatever. Only Apple can tell you whether or not that movie works for them on that. But from a box office, from a movie, a grossing potential for, theater owners, that's a win.
Well, I'm thrilled that Superman, from what I'm reading, although I don't know if it's an official running time, a mere 2 hours and 10 minutes. I'm in, baby. I'm getting sick of these movies that are bloated and they go on forever and I have to pee like 5 times during the movie, not to get Oh, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Well, you know what you're going to do? You're going to listen to Ticket to Ride. We're going to turn this one around quickly because it is a 4th of July special where the fireworks fly between the three of us, Thaddeus Bouchard, Mike Polydorus, and me, Paul DeGarabedian. We really appreciate everyone watching and listening, following along at home, and we'll have more episodes in the future for you. Happy 4th of July.
we have a special guest coming up on
we do.
Our next episode, I believe.
We do.
And
we do.
We're going to keep that. We're going to
Very
keep that
famous,
under wraps.
a famous guest.
Yes, we have a very famous guest who.
I don't even think Thaddeus knows who it is.
We'll have to give him the ceremonial ticket, right?
Yes.
There you go. I like it.
So looking forward to that.
All right, guys. Thanks again. Ticket to Ride, episode 13, season 2.
Have a great weekend, guys. Enjoy the 4th.
See you at the movies.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.